it's me, and welcome to yet another new Limbus ID overview. This is the last update of Season 5, and so we've received a single triple-aught ID in our Corp 4th pack Reindeer Hung Lu, who is the first syncing ID since Walpurgisnacht 4, and also the first charge of anything since, well, Walpurgisnacht 4. He's from this pool of standard fare IDs, thankfully, so even if you don't want him, you can get him whenever you like. With that being said, let's jump straight into his kit. Our Corp 4th pack Reindeer Hung Lu does introduce a new keyword, but it isn't actually a new status or effect for the game. Unfocused Volley is just the way that the targeting for Gregor's Solemn Lament Ego deals damage. Each coin can only hit and apply effects to a single target in its attack weight, and the first hit always hits the main target. There isn't anything new to examine with it, however. His passive, Brainwave Charge Focusing Antlers, is fueled with 3 NV resources, and he has the ability to gain charge potency by spending charge count over the course of an encounter. More importantly, however, once he has 2 charge potency, he begins to inflict more sinking potency and dealing more damage with all of his skills. The damage is probably the more meaningful effect here since it doesn't inflict more sinking count, but it isn't like his sinking infliction is bad by any means. His support passive is also only 3 NV owned, and boosts the damage of the final coin of a skill that gains charge count for whichever ally has the most charge. There's a very healthy chance this applies to skills where you'd want it to, and it's generally a pretty solid support passive for charge teams. His defense skill, Energy Condensation, is a 10 to 16 rolling NV guard that becomes a 10 to 20 when over 10 charge count. It also gains 3 charge count up to twice per turn on use, which is always nice. Having an NV defense skill is always a good for a charge or NV resonance ID, both of which this ID can fulfill if you need him to, so while he is pretty frail, it's a decent tool to have nonetheless. Energy Strike is a 3 to 11 rolling blunt gluttony skill with 2 coins that can become a 3 to 15 with high enough charge potency and count. It can gain up to 6 charge count per use, but by default it will be gaining 4 since you can't have less than 1 charge potency, and it gains some charge count on use. Also worth noting that every single one of this ID's skills gains some amount of damage increase from having charge, and it also applies even at 1 charge potency. This skill being Gluttony is also important, as Gluttony skills tend to be very rare on charge IDs, so it being his skill 1 gives him a unique ability to generate a rare resource for a team that may need it. Mind Whip is a 2 to 14 rolling blunt NV skill with 4 coins, and can spend 10 charge count to become a 2 to 22 rolling skill instead. This skill is unsurprisingly the meat of his kit, and has a lot of nuance to it, in that you really don't want to be using it when between 5 to 9 charge count. While it does automatically raise his charge count to 10 and gain 1 attack weight, it also gives him 10 sinking potency and causes the skill to become indiscriminate, and makes it an unfocused volley. It is theoretically possible for it to just hit enemies, but if there are very few enemies left, you're upping the chance to attack your own allies. There is one small upside, and that is that this skill does not become indiscriminate if you have 5 or more charge potency. Realistically though, you have to use this skill 5 times to get to that point during an encounter. The hits themselves inflict some sinking and also raise the stagger threshold of the target by frankly a meaningless amount. Also, if after you spend 10 charge count for the coin power on the skill, you still have at least 8 charge count, you will spend all 8 charge count to deal an extra 40% more damage with the skill. All in all, it can deal a ton of damage, but you do need to facilitate it by having enough charge count to use it, or it will likely struggle to hold up on the skill 2s of other IDs. Concentration is an 8 to 18 rolling blunt wrath skill with a single coin. Kind of, because it gains 1 base power and coin power for every charge potency, up to 5, and since it gains charge count in use, the default roll of this skill will always be 9 to 20. It also gains 4 final power when at 10 plus charge count, making the final roll power a 17 to 32 at maximum conditionals. While this is an insanely strong skill for clashing, you don't really want to use it at maximum capacity, since it gains more charge count than the rest of his kit combined, giving a minimum of 11 and a maximum of 15. It inflicts a ton of sinking count, like a sustainable amount to run alongside a sinking team, and deals an extra amount of damage by 5 times the roll of the skill's percent more, as well as a 60 to 100% damage boost once you're at 3 or more charge potency. Despite the fact that it's single coin, it deals a really solid amount of damage in almost any case. There's 2 specific ego that this ID synergizes particularly well with, though he can't perfectly fuel either of them on his own. The first is Dimension Shredder for 2 reasons. The first is that the skill itself gives a decent amount of charge count and inflicts fragile to whoever it hits, and the second is because of the passive. Gaining an extra charge count when hitting an enemy who has a negative effect will happen a lot since all but one of this ID's coins inflict sinking. Plus, the corrosion is cheap enough to use and can spend charge count to inflict a bunch of extra fragile. The second is Soda, which is a pretty decent heal for either HP or SP whenever it's used. While not super strong on its own, the support passive provides a bunch of extra SP to help offset Honglu's loss of SP if he ever inflicts sinking on himself. If you have it, it's worth equipping just for the additional SP from the passive and the fact that it's an NV skill. When it comes to team building for this ID, there's a very obvious team that this fits into in Charge. He's a more selfish alternative to W Corp Honglu, who has a much higher damage threshold but can't give charge count to other allies in any way. The best individual allies for him, or rather ally, is W Corp Otis due to her ability to give a lot of charge count to her other allies just by existing on the field. Other units known for giving charge count to allies through their ego are W Corp Don Quixote, W Corp Merceau, and Rhino Merceau thanks to Telepole and Electric Screaming respectively, to help enable Honglu to use the skill 2 at full power far more often. Having an NV defense skill also makes this ID work rather decently in an NV Resonance team, especially since he actually has an NV ego. Any of the 3 middle IDs work particularly well as the Multicracks and Red Eyes and Penitence Ryoshu. Bonus points for Red Eyes and Penitence as well as the Multicracks for happening to also be charge IDs. W Corp Ryoshu and W Corp Faust also work really well here, simply because they are charge IDs that work well alongside W Corp Otis. W Faust can also give a small amount of charge to her allies as well after attacking. There is one charge ID that this Honglu doesn't work well with though, and ironically that is R Corp Reindeer Ishmael. She relies very heavily on Gloom Resonance to make up for the fact that her damage is a bit subpower outside of her own Mind Whip. It's also not advised to use both Reindeer in a sinking team at the same time, though using one is okay and Honglu is the better at inflicting it. While I wouldn't say this is even Honglu's best sinking ID, as he has access to Diechi, who has better sin affinities and damage for that archetype, he'll work great as a substitute if you haven't been able to obtain Diechi yet. He can't contribute to Gloom Resonance outside of his base ego, however, which may hurt his running for that spot. He works really well in sinking teams that inflict Echoes of the Manor, so those that feature the Wuthering Heights Butlers, Faust and Otis, as well as a Molar Boatworks Ishmael with Bygone Days equipped. This is because Echoes of the Manor will all but make his sinking count infliction neutral across the board, though only at a 50% chance. Aside from those 3, any powerful sinking ID will also work decently well with him. Edgar Family Heir Gregor, Wild Hunt Heathcliff, Spicebush or Solemn Lament Yisang, and Diechi Rodion are all great matches for him since they inflict high sinking count, and Honglu is more than capable of supplying the potency. And that's all I have to say about the new ID, but I want to briefly take some time to look over the new ego from the last update that I didn't make a video about. Rodion's Indicant's Trial is her second VoV ego, and as a result is the first VoV ego that has to compete with another of its own rank. That being said, I won't be doing a team building section for it because it is just the best choice for any team that isn't Bleed specifically, since Sanguine Desire only really provides any benefit for Bleed teams. The Awakening is an 8 to 24 rolling Pierce Wrath ego with 2 coins and 4 attack weight, and can gain up to 3 attack weight based on your highest resonance, capping out at 7. It's the most cost-tunneled ego, requiring 10 resources total, not an insane amount for a VoV, in fact it's on the cheaper end, but only needing 2 types of resource overall in Wrath and Pride. And while it is good for damage, I would say that the most important part of this ego is the ability to heal half of your team by 20% of their max HP. It does require resonance to heal more than one ally, but as long as at least 2 skills are the same sin affinity, it will always heal for the maximum amount. Oh, and all this ego gains from Threadspin 4 is 2% more healing, so you can use it at Threadspin 3 without having to dish out the shards to max it out. It does inflict burn and is Wrath, meaning burn teams will really want to have it. This is more true by looking at its new status effect in Searing Birdcage, which it only inflicts to the main target on use. For every stack, it weakens the unit's Wrath resistance by 0.1, but can't make the weakness higher than 2.0, and inflicts bind equal to its amount next turn before cutting the stack in half. Very good for dealing a lot of extra damage in single target fights, but as an effect it isn't too important outside of that due to how much Wrath Fragility is already inflictable by Burn Ego. The passive also heals SP for allies and spreads burn count across enemies if a target with 10 or more burn count is defeated, and since any ally can activate this effect, it's not a bad passive bonus for a burn team specifically. That said, 10 burn count is a lot, even for a burn team, especially if there is more than one target in the same fight, since they can defeat units really quickly on average now. The Corrosion, on the other hand, is one of the worst in the entire game. It has the exact same power and attack weight conditionals as the Awakening, even down to being positive coin, with the only difference being that the coins are unbreakable. It does not heal, instead the second coin deals a bunch of extra damage if the target has burn, and applies one Wrath power up and Wrath damage up if it manages to get a kill, but only once per skill and once per ally. It inflicts one burn count, unlike the Awakening, and can actually inflict up to the 5 maximum of Searing Birdcage as well. But none of this really matters, because using this Corrosion will cost you 60 SP, meaning the highest SP you can have when using it is negative 15. For a positive coin skill of any kind, this is abysmal, and the unbreakable coins do not help offset that imbalance in any way. All that said, this Ego is Season 5, so it is going to no longer be available to dispense after May 15th. It's chartable right now, so if you play Burn or want it for any other reason, I would recommend getting it now. And that's all there is to it. Thank you so much for watching my video. I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed as it helps me out a lot, and let me know in the comments what you think about this new ID. I have both it and Rodion's Ego in my company if you'd like to try them out before you get them yourself. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon.